The CoinDesk Spotlight is brought to you by Nexo, the place to earn on Bitcoin, Ethereum, and more.
This morning, we're learning that Robert Iger, who spent decades at the helm of Walt Disney's animated magic, is joining the Metaverse, backing a startup to create personal avatars, according to the Wall Street Journal. Joining us now to discuss regulating the space is Bradley Tusk, founder and CEO of Tusk Strategies. Hello there, Bradley. Thanks for joining us. So Disney's ex-mega boss is entering the Metaverse. Next week, Decentraland is hosting its first Metaverse Fashion Week. How are we going to regulate all this?
Yeah, I mean, we put out a memo about 6 weeks ago kind of on how the metaverse should be regulated, simply because we know that it's coming. We see people like Bob Iger who are incredibly effective moving forward on this kind of stuff. And yet, if you were to ask anyone at any level of government, they would just give you a completely blank stare if you asked them what the metaverse was, let alone what they should deal with it. And so the disparity of innovation is always going to be ahead of regulation, because by definition, the regulators don't know what to regulate until someone creates it in the first place. But here's what we know about the metaverse. A lot of it will be like Internet 2.0. So any problems that we currently have, whether it's around privacy, safety, data monetization, consumer protection, whatever it is, they're still going to exist in the metaverse, probably times 5 or 10. And so the thought is maybe our government could do something really radical for once and get out ahead of a problem and actually say, why don't we spend some time thinking about what all these issues are going to be in the metaverse, and let's actually have some plans rather than just being taken by surprise like they always are.
So you also have some thoughts on the executive order that President Joe Biden signed the other week and how mainstream companies should be interpreting it. I wonder if you could weigh in on that, if you could.
Yeah, sure. I heard Kevin's interview before, and I think overall his philosophy is right, but I'm a little less bullish than he is. Look, I think the executive order in and of itself is validating in a way. It didn't say we want to put crypto out of business, so it's better than where we are in the EU at the moment. However, two things. One, it didn't really say anything, right? Basically, all it said was that we have to write 10 reports in the next 18 months. We know what happens to government reports. They sit on a shelf. But the bigger thing is this. All of the power that the SEC, the CFTC, FDIC, Treasury had to heavily regulate crypto before the executive order, they still have now. If anything, if you look at the language of the executive order, especially the first two provisions, it strongly reinforced that power. They said anything they need to do to make the economy more stable, they're free to do it. So yes, the provisions on, hey, we got to crack down on, fraudulent ICOs or protect national security or create crypto jobs, all great. Nobody disagrees with that. But I think the underlying political risk is still there as much as it was a week before.
So Bradley, let's take that executive order and break it into pieces and weigh it. How would you weigh it as mostly positive, as more positive or more negative, and what would fall in each bucket?
It's a good question. So I would say that if the community reacted to it with a little more skepticism, then I think we could say it's about equal, a little more positive. What scares me is that the interpretation of this by the community, to me, feels a little politically naive. People were excited. Bitcoin jumped up 8.4% on the day it was announced. Lots of positive feedback from people in the crypto world. But the reality is this. The biggest threat facing cryptocurrency in the US and everywhere else is regulation. It's not technology. It's not marketing. It's not participation. It's regulation. And if the SEC wanted, they could put an incredible crimp in how crypto operates in this country. And we have a regulator, Gary Gensler, who's not friendly to crypto, and all of his powers are reinforced by the executive order. So I would say, look, there are some buckets to like, just like they were talking about the unbanked and kind of minorities lacking access to the financial system. Nobody who likes crypto thinks that the financial system works, right? If we did, we wouldn't be into crypto in the first place. So we're in agreement there. Creating jobs in the U.S. around crypto and having Gina Raimondo, who's the Commerce Secretary, oversee that. Really good. She's incredibly talented. She was governor of Rhode Island before this and did some interesting things. She was once a VC. So that's good. Making sure that the next Putin can't sort of evade economic sanctions by putting everything into crypto in some way. Great. Let's think about that. Nobody wants to help a dictator. So there are some definite positives here. But fundamentally, it seems to me what the community still has failed to do is create a sustained political effort to be able to make a difference. Yes, you have individual companies lobbying and spending some money, but they're looking out mainly for their own interests. And look, I spent the first 15 years of my career in politics and government. The U.S. Senate, I was deputy governor of Illinois. I ran Mike Bloomberg's campaign for mayor. So I've seen this from a lot of angles. And the thing that I learned is every policy output is the result of a political input. Every elected official solely wants to get reelected, and that comes way ahead of anything else. If they think that you can have an impact in their next election, you can either help them win or you could cause them to lose, they will listen to you and frequently do what you want. But if they don't think you can do that, you don't matter. And right now, there's not a single politician in this country that thinks that the crypto community could have an impact in any election whatsoever, from dog catcher to president. So until the community takes politics seriously, becomes more like a farmer or something like that, and really gets engaged, all of that risk still remains.
Yeah, I was going to mention that, look, we have a lot of people in the industry that actually do want more regulation of crypto because it would give them, in some cases, competitive advantage over some others. But nonetheless, I mean, are there parts of crypto that would do well with regulation, or at least some more regulatory clarity? Do you think that, for instance, stablecoins, as we discussed with Kevin earlier, do you think that stablecoins, for instance, would be better off with some of that clarity than without?
Yeah, absolutely. There was legislation introduced about a month ago by Representative Gottheimer in the House that I think has some promise around stablecoin. And so, look, any serious player in the industry should want at least a modicum of regulation. My venture fund is in Coinbase, we're in Circle, we're in a bunch of different companies that are legitimate, real companies, and we want something to separate us from the scammers doing fraudulent ICOs and things like that. So, regulation could be helpful to provide validity. Regulation could be helpful to set rules around things like, reserve requirements for stable coins, or whether people can borrow on margin, things like that. So it's not that we don't need it. It's that we have to be part of that process of influencing it. And the only real way to be part of that process is to be politically salient. And the community right now is not.
Bradley, finally, in the next 15 minutes, the EU Parliament is scheduled to discuss the Markets in Crypto Assets bill. In it is a potentially limiting provision that could ban proof of work mining. I wonder if you could weigh in on some of those concerns.
Yeah, well, number one, this is exactly what I've been talking about, which is if you don't have your act together politically, you're going to face bills and risks like this all the time. Number two, on mining specifically, I think that Norway concept really is going to be the way to go. You will start to see individual U.S. states pass legislation putting real restrictions on the energy usage of crypto mining. And there are companies right now that are creating zero emission crypto mining. They're the ones that I think have a big opportunity here. But anyone who does sort of the normal approach to it, and it's dirty energy, I think they have to assume that the world's going to change and not in their favor.